Okay, let's set the scene. Think back to Calcutta, late 1885. We've got Sri Ramakrishna, this major spiritual figure.
Right.
But he's at this really critical point. His health is failing, but at the same time, his following, the number of devotees, it's actually growing fast.
Yeah, it's a very dynamic situation.
Yeah.
And this leads to the move to Shyampukur, this new residence.
Exactly. And that move immediately brings up huge challenges. Like, how do you provide medical care, serious medical care, alongside, the spiritual support everyone needed?
Well, this whole period at Shyampukur, it's covered in detail in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, chapter 54 specifically. It gives us this incredible look at how this emerging community dealt with a major health crisis focused on their leader.
It's more than just history, isn't it? It's like a case study in devotion and practical problem solving, too.
Absolutely. It really is.
So for this deep dive, we're really going to get into those first days at Shyampukur. We'll look at the real hurdles, logistical and emotional, of caring for Sri Ramakrishna.
And the amazing commitment of his disciples, his early ones especially.
Yeah, and also these fascinating interactions he had with a very well-known doctor from that time.
Right.
Our goal here is to really understand those moments of just pure selfless service and this intersection of faith and medicine, which is always interesting.
And you also see the very beginnings of this significant spiritual brotherhood forming.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where exactly did this happen, this move to Shyampukur?
The biography says it was the beginning of September 1885. And the house itself, it offered a bit more space than before. 2 large rooms, 2 smaller ones, all on the first floor.
Okay, so how did they use the space? It sounds like every bit was needed.
Oh, it was. One large room was basically the parlor, for visitors' discussions. The other large one was Sri Ramakrishna's own living quarters.
And the smaller rooms, crucial for the actual care, I imagine.
Totally crucial. One was set aside for the devotees who were staying over to help, sort of a sleeping area. The other was specifically for the Holy Mother, for when she was there.
Right.
And there was also this interesting little covered spot near the stairs to the roof. That became her space during the day. And it's where she cooked Sri Ramakrishna's meals.
Wow, that really highlights how tight the arrangements must have been. They really had to adapt.
It definitely did.
Which brings us to the medical side, because a big figure comes into play here, right? Dr. Mahendra Lal Sarkar?
Yes, Dr. Sarkar. And this wasn't actually the first time they'd met.
Oh, really?
No, he'd met Sri Ramakrishna before, back at Dakshineswar, during Mathur Babu's time. So given his reputation as a top physician, it was natural they'd approach him.
Makes sense.
And the biography details his first examination, the prescription he gave, and he asked for daily reports on Sri Ramakrishna's condition.
And there's that story about the fees, right? What happened when he found out the devotees were paying?
Yeah, that's quite telling. When he learned that these ordinary householder devotees were covering all the costs themselves, bringing the master to Calcutta for treatment, well, he immediately offered his services completely free. He called it a labor of love. It really shows the respect, maybe even a bit of awe he felt right from the start.
But even with a respected doctor like Sarkar involved, the devotees were still deeply anxious, weren't they? It wasn't just about having a doctor.
That's a really key point. They knew medicine wasn't the whole picture. They needed dedicated people, day in, day out, to cook the right food for someone so ill and to provide constant nursing.
Yeah, you can't just hire someone for that level of, devotion. Money couldn't solve that particular problem.
Exactly. It needed personal commitment, real selfless service.
And that's where the Holy Mother and the young disciples step in so powerfully. But the source also mentions some pretty big obstacles they faced first.
Oh yeah, significant difficulties. Firstly, the Shyampukur house, it just didn't have separate women's quarters. That was a huge issue for accommodating the Holy Mother.
Right, culturally that would be very difficult.
Very. And secondly, many of the most devoted followers were young students. They had studies, family responsibilities. Their guardians might not approve if they just dropped everything.
Understandable pressure from families.
And finally, the text mentions the Holy Mother's own natural shyness. The devotees weren't even sure if she'd agree to come, given the circumstances.
So how did they handle this? It sounds almost impossible. What did Sri Ramakrishna say when they told him?
Well, they went to him directly, and his response was, typically simple. He basically put the decision entirely on her. He asked them, will she be able to accommodate herself here? However, he said, explain everything to her and see if she wants to come. So the responsibility really fell on her willingness, her ability to make it work.
And she did make it work, incredibly so. Her deciding to come, despite how uncomfortable it must have been, that says so much about her devotion.
It really does.
It's not just the work, it's that unseen strength, that focus driven by love. It really shows the power of selfless action, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The biography points out she'd really absorbed Sri Ramakrishna's teachings about adapting, her main reason for coming. She was worried that without proper cooking, the master's illness would get much worse.
So her concern for him outweighed everything else.
Completely. She put aside any thought of her own comfort and just offered her help straight away.
The details of her daily routine there, they paint such a vivid picture. It sounds exhausting.
It really does. The text describes it so clearly. There was only one bathroom, right? So she had to get up at 3 a.m., just to bathe before anyone else was up.
Wow.
And that narrow place near the roof, that was her daytime spot in her kitchen. From there, she'd cook and then figure out how to get the food to him. Often Gopal Sr. or Latu would take it. Sometimes she'd take it herself.
And this was all happening while visitors were coming and going, largely unnoticed.
Pretty much. Her routine was relentless. She'd eat and rest a bit at noon up in that same little garret space. Then, only after 11 p.m., when everyone else was asleep, could she finally go down to her own room for just a few hours sleep.
Unbelievable dedication.
And the biography stresses how quiet and cheerful she was through it all. Most regular visitors had no idea she was playing this absolutely central role in his care.
So, once the food situation was handled by the Holy Mother, the next big need was night nursing. And again, the young disciples stepped forward, with one taking the lead.
Yes, that was Narendra Nath. The future Swami Vivekananda. He really took the initiative. He volunteered to stay at Shyampukur himself and manage the night nursing duties.
His example must have been powerful.
It was huge. It inspired other young men. The biography mentions Gopal Jr., who was quite new then, and also Kali and Sasi. They all joined in this seva, this service.
And the text suggests this wasn't just about helping out, it was transformative for them.
Definitely. Narendra's sacrifice, his company, it had a profound effect. It helped them, banish their own selfishness. They resolved to dedicate their lives to serving their guru and seeking God realization. It created this shared sense of purpose.
At first, their families were okay with it, but things changed later.
That's right. Initially, there wasn't much objection. But as Sri Ramakrishna got sicker, these young men, naturally, spent more and more time there. They started neglecting studies, missing meals at home.
Which, understandably, worried their parents or guardians.
Exactly. So the guardians got alarmed. They started trying to get their sons back home, sometimes persuasion, sometimes more forceful methods.
But the young men held firm.
They did. They were inspired by Narendra's unwavering example. And it's amazing, the numbers grew. The text says what started as maybe 4 or 5 helpers at Shyampukur eventually became almost 4 times that many. A real wave of commitment.
Now, all this dedication, this intensive care, facing a potentially long illness, it must have brought up money worries, right?
Oh, absolutely. The text is very clear about that. The devotees were anxious. A long illness could be very expensive. And they were mostly householders with, limited means.
So what kept them going? What sustained them through that anxiety?
Well, it was their incredible faith, their belief in Sri Ramakrishna, seeing him not just as a great man, but something more.
Right, their understanding of him was deepening during this time, wasn't it? A shift was happening.
A definite shift. They kept witnessing these, as the text calls them, unprecedented evidences of spiritual power. It solidified their conviction that he wasn't just a Superman, but the Lord himself, right there in human form.
And that led to some interesting interpretations of the illness itself.
Yes, some even started thinking his illness might be a kind of divine leela. Divine play. Maybe he'd sort of feigned illness or allowed it specifically to give them this chance to serve him selflessly.
That belief must have changed how they tackled the financial problem.
It totally did. Faith fueled their resourcefulness. They talked openly about how to raise money. Things like mortgaging property, pawning jewelry, the kinds of things people do in a family crisis.
Real practical measures.
And also just individuals quietly cutting back their own household spending to contribute to savings.
And did practical solutions actually work out?
They did. The biography mentions Surendra stepped up to pay the house rent. Others like Balaram, Ramchandra, Mahendra, Girish, they basically pooled resources to cover the rest of the costs, both at Shyampukur and later at Cossipore.
It sounds like this shared challenge really forged them together.
Exactly. The text makes a beautiful point about this. Their shared devotion, focused on Sri Ramakrishna, created this unbreakable bond. It really solidified the beginnings of the Ramakrishna Brotherhood. Some devotees even felt the illness itself was meant to create this unity. You know how shared struggle can build strong ties.
It's really interesting, though, that even with this shared purpose, they didn't all agree on why Sri Ramakrishna was sick. That tells you something about early spiritual groups, doesn't it?
It really does. Even with a central figure everyone adores, people have different ways of making sense of big events. It wasn't about everyone believing the exact same thing, but about shared commitment, despite those differences.
So the biography outlines different viewpoints.
Yeah, it groups them into three main camps. The first, kind of led by Girish Chandra Ghosh, was very optimistic. They saw the whole thing simply as a divine play, a leela, nothing fundamentally wrong.
Okay, that's one view. What about the second group?
They saw Sri Ramakrishna more as an instrument of the Divine Mother. They figured his illness must serve some kind of mysterious good purpose that she intended for humanity. Maybe even a purpose Sri Ramakrishna himself didn't fully grasp.
That's quite different from the third perspective.
Very different. The third group, and Narendranath was a key voice here, took a more, rational approach. They saw his physical body as, subject to natural laws like any other body.
So look for a physical cause and solution.
Pretty much. They didn't see much point in assigning hidden meanings to the illness. Their focus was get the best medical care possible, and meanwhile, really try to live up to his ideals through their own spiritual practice or sadhana, unless, some clear spiritual revelation proved otherwise.
But despite these different interpretations of the why, there was something that united them all.
Absolutely. The unifying factor was their total commitment to practicing his teachings and earning his grace through serving him. That shared action, that dedication, that's what held the community together, even with differing ideas about the illness itself.
Okay, let's swing back to Dr. Sarkar. His rule started as purely medical, but it grew into something more, didn't it?
It definitely did. At first, yes, strictly medical visits. Sometimes he'd come 3 times a day, checking the illness's progression. But the biography notes that after the medical check, he'd often stick around.
To talk?
Yeah, to talk with Sri Ramakrishna about religious matters, mostly. And through these talks, he quickly realized the master's, profound spirituality. He started to genuinely value just being in his company.
And there's that story where Sri Ramakrishna tries to thank him.
Right. One day, Sri Ramakrishna starts thanking Dr. Sarkar for all his kindness, but the doctor cuts him off.
Oh.
Yeah, he admits his long visits aren't just medical anymore. He says he gets immense joy from Sri Ramakrishna's company, an opportunity he felt he'd missed before because he was too busy. And he frankly admires Sri Ramakrishna's total devotion to truth.
Contrasting it with hypocrisy he saw elsewhere.
Exactly. He said he saw so much hypocrisy in his work, and Sri Ramakrishna's sincerity was refreshing.
And the doctor wasn't afraid to be blunt himself, was he?
Not at all. The biography quotes him saying he was notorious for bluntness. He claimed he'd even confront his own father if he thought he was wrong.
Huh. What did Sri Ramakrishna say to that?
His response was witty. He said something like, "Well, you've been visiting so often, but I haven't seen this famous bluntness yet."
And the doctor's reply?
The doctor said they should both be grateful for that. Because if he had seen any hypocrisy in Sri Ramakrishna, he wouldn't have kept quiet about it. It shows his critical mind, but also his growing respect,
Their talks went pretty deep theologically too, didn't they?
They did. There was this key exchange where the doctor spoke out against limiting God. Sri Ramakrishna strongly agreed, saying he couldn't stand such foolish statements. Then Sri Ramakrishna asked someone to sing a song by Ram Prasad.
And he explained it to the doctor.
Yes, and characteristically, he even corrected the singer when a word was slightly off.
Oh, really? To get the meaning just right.
Exactly. He wanted to stress the core idea. The mind might know intellectually it can't fully grasp the absolute, but the heart still yearns desperately to reach him. The doctor was apparently fascinated by this insight into the human spiritual struggle.
And these weren't just abstract discussions. People were having real spiritual experiences right there.
Oh, yes. During that very song, a couple of the young devotees actually went into a trance state.
What did the doctor make of that?
Well, being a doctor, he examined them, noted they seemed unconscious externally, Sri Ramakrishna then gently touched their chests, said God's name, and brought them back. And Dr. Sarkar attributed it directly to the master's influence.
That's a fascinating collision of worlds, the scientific and the spiritual. They even debated things like knowledge and humility.
They did.
Yeah.
The doctor mentioned how superficial knowledge can make you arrogant, while deep knowledge brings humility. Sri Ramakrishna agreed, but added his own twist.
Which was?
That worldly knowledge often does lead to dogmatism. He praised the doctor, saying his great learning combined with his humility was a sign of divine grace.
And the doctor seemed open to learning from anyone.
He really did. He said he'd learn even from the young devotees, even offered to touch their feet, a huge gesture of respect. Sri Ramakrishna saw that humility as proof of the doctor's true worth.
So clearly, what started as a doctor-patient thing became a real bond over time.
Definitely. The biography says Dr. Sarkar became increasingly attached, and Sri Ramakrishna, wanting to guide him spiritually, encouraged his close disciples to talk with the doctor too.
Did those interactions change the doctor's perspective?
They seemed to. He saw Girsh's religious plays, he enjoyed talking with Narendra and hearing him sing. He thought very highly of Narendra, but he still struggled with the idea of, well, divinity in a human being. The whole concept of incarnation. He was quite direct about his skepticism, even to Sri Ramakrishna himself.
How did Sri Ramakrishna take that direct challenge?
He seemed amused, actually. He just told the devotees listen to him. He acknowledged that, yes, there are foolish bigots who cause trouble by pushing their own ideas too hard, but that doesn't mean divine incarnation isn't real.
So this disagreement led to some debates.
Oh yeah. The text calls them passages at arms between the doctor and devotees like Girish and Narendra. They argued about it quite a bit.
Did the arguments convince the doctor?
Not entirely on their own. He had to admit the devotees had some good points, but the biography suggests it wasn't just logic that started to shift his view.
What was it then? Something deeper?
Exactly. It emphasizes Sri Ramakrishna's immense love, his gentleness, and these undeniable spiritual experiences the doctor was witnessing firsthand. That combination started to open his mind in a way arguments alone couldn't.
Was there a specific event that really stood out for the doctor, like the Durga Puja incident?
Ah, yes, that's a major one. So Surendranath Mitra is holding Durga Puja at his home, but he's sad because Sri Ramakrishna is too ill to come.
Right.
Then on the second evening of the puja, lots of devotees are gathered in Sri Ramakrishna's room at Shyampukur. Narendra is there, Dr. Sarkar too. Narendra starts singing. Everyone's deeply moved, and Sri Ramakrishna keeps going into trance.
Okay, a very charged atmosphere.
Very. Then comes the Sandhi Puja time, the most sacred point, around 7:30 p.m. Dr. Sarkar is about to leave. Sri Ramakrishna gets up to say goodbye, and boom, falls into deep samadhi.
Wow. What did the doctor do?
The devotees thought it was the holiness of the moment. The doctor, intrigued, sat back down.
And when Sri Ramakrishna came back to normal consciousness?
About half an hour later, he described this incredible vision he'd just had. He saw a path of light stretching from Shyampukur all the way to Surendra's house.
A luminous path.
Yes. And he said, through Surendra's devotion, the Divine Mother had actually manifested in the Durga image there. He saw her with a radiant third eye, saw the lamps burning, and saw Surendra weeping in the courtyard. He told the devotees, go comfort him.
Did they go? And what about the doctor's reaction during the samadhi?
Okay, two things. First, yes, Narendra and others went straight to Surendra's house and found everything exactly as Sri Ramakrishna had described, including Surendra weeping. It confirmed the vision. But second, during the samadhi, Dr. Sarkar and another doctor who was there actually examined Sri Ramakrishna with a stethoscope.
Oh no.
No heartbeat, none. They even touched his eyeball, no reaction. Both doctors had to admit, basically, that science couldn't explain what they were seeing.
That must have made a huge impression. But life at Shyampukur wasn't just about the illness and the doctor. There were major spiritual events too, like the Kali Puja.
Absolutely. Kali Puja was coming up, a festival Sri Ramakrishna loved. Some devotees, especially Devendra, really wanted to celebrate it there, in his presence.
But there were concerns about his health.
Right. Initially, others opposed the idea. They worried the excitement would be too much for him. So Devendra dropped the plan.
But Sri Ramakrishna had other ideas.
Totally unexpected. On the very eve of the festival, he suddenly tells some devotees to gather things for a small Kali Puja the next day.
They must have been thrilled.
Immensely joyful. They rushed out and got the essential items, even on short notice.
So, the evening of the puja itself, how did it unfold? It sounds like it was unusual.
It was. They brought all the puja items into his room, set them up near his bed. They kind of expected he might perform the worship himself, maybe like they'd seen him do before.
But he didn't.
No, he just remained silent. Seemed totally detached from the preparations. Lamps were lit, incense burning, but the master wasn't taking part. Everyone was waiting.
Then Girish Chandra had a realization.
Exactly. Girish was puzzled at first, then it hit him. Sri Ramakrishna didn't need to worship for himself. Maybe, Girish thought, maybe the master was giving them the chance to worship the Divine Mother through him.
Ah, a different perspective.
Right. And overwhelmed by this idea, Girish took flowers and sandal paste, offered them at Sri Ramakrishna's feet, and cried out, "Glory to the Divine Mother!"
And that single act changed everything.
Instantly, a visible thrill went through Sri Ramakrishna's body. The next second, he was in deep samadhi.
Wow. And the others?
Mahendra quickly followed Girish's lead, then Rakal, then soon all the devotees were worshipping Sri Ramakrishna with flowers, and during this, his appearance seemed to transform.
How so?
His face grew luminous. This divine smile appeared. One hand was raised in blessing, the other in the boon-granting pose, just like images of Mother Kali. The devotees felt completely overwhelmed, like they were directly experiencing the Divine Mother manifesting right there, through him.
What an incredible experience for them. What happened afterwards?
The room was filled with joyous shouts. When Sri Ramakrishna came back to consciousness, they offered him the consecrated food. He took some, blessed everyone, wishing them the highest devotion and knowledge. They shared the prasad, spent most of the night singing devotional songs.
That evening must have really shifted things for them.
Profoundly. It cemented their belief in his constant presence, his protection, a real turning point in their understanding.
And even though he was so ill, new people kept coming to see him at Shyampukur. He didn't stop guiding them.
Not at all. It shows his incredible dedication. Despite getting weaker, householders, young men, they kept seeking him out. The biography mentions names like Harish Chandra Mustafi, Sarada Prasanna Mitra, Manindra Nath Gupta. They all met him first there.
And he gave them personal guidance, even when it cost him physically.
Absolutely. He put aside his own pain to give them exactly the instruction they needed. There's this really poignant example where he's showing meditation postures.
For different aspects of God.
Yes, for both the personal and the impersonal. But when he tried to demonstrate the posture for meditating on the impersonal, he immediately went into samadhi. And this caused a rush of blood to his throat, actual physical pain.
Just from demonstrating.
Yes. It shows how committed he was to their training, even when doctors were warning him to be careful.
Another really interesting meeting at Shyampukur was with Prabhudayal Misra, the Christian devotee. It shows how broad Sri Ramakrishna's appeal was.
That's a very significant encounter. Prabhudayal Misra, he was a Quaker from northern India. He'd suffered a great personal loss, lost his brothers, and was living as a renunciant. He sought out Sri Ramakrishna.
And their conversation revealed Prabhudayal's own deep spirituality.
It did. He believed Jesus was God himself. And he shared this amazing story of having had a vision of Sri Ramakrishna before ever meeting him physically. He saw him seated in a garden, recognized him then, and recognized him again now in person.
Wow. He also talked about his own visions.
Yes, visions of light and of Jesus, whose beauty he said was incomparable.
And Sri Ramakrishna had an experience during this meeting too.
He did. He saw Prabhudayal in what he called a heroic posture. Then Sri Ramakrishna went into samadhi, and when he came out a bit, he shook Prabhudayal's hand with a smile and blessed him, saying, "Your desire will be fulfilled."
Prabhudayal must have been deeply affected.
Totally. He expressed his complete surrender to Sri Ramakrishna right then.
And Dr. Sarkar witnessed some of this.
Yes, Dr. Sarkar arrived while Sri Ramakrishna was still in samadhi. When the master regained consciousness, his first words were, "I am not senseless." Then he sang a song about divine bliss, which really moved the doctor.
There was also a touching moment with the doctor.
Yes, Sri Ramakrishna, still in this exalted mood, actually placed his legs on Dr. Sarkar's lap for a moment. Later, he praised something the doctor had said earlier about resting in the Divine Mother's arms and praying to her.
And he mentioned the doctor's purity.
He did, tearfully.
Yeah.
He said it was the doctor's purity that allowed this kind of physical contact. The whole meeting ended with Sri Ramakrishna asking Narendra to sing a specific song about being drunk with the bliss of God.
Now, the biography also mentions a very intense vision Sri Ramakrishna had about himself, about his subtle body, something about absorbing negativity.
Yes, this is a powerful, quite complex vision. He saw his own subtle body, but it had sores on its back. And the understanding came to him that these sores were caused by the touch of people.
People visiting him.
Yes. people who were themselves purified by contacting him, but in the process, they had somehow transferred their past sins onto him. It resonates with things he'd said before at Dakshineswar about being willing to be born again and again for mankind.
That must have deeply affected the devotees hearing that.
Oh, hugely. They felt his immense compassion, but it also made them incredibly protective. They resolved then and there to stop outsiders from touching him. Some even vowed not to touch him themselves while he was ill.
Did they see parallels to other traditions?
Narendra and some others definitely saw a similarity to the Christian idea of vicarious atonement. But Girish Chandra characteristically had a different take.
What was his view?
Girish argued that Sri Ramakrishna was born for this very purpose, to accept everyone, sins and all. So trying to completely shield him was impossible, even wrong.
So how did they resolve this? What rules did they put in place?
They compromised. They decided newcomers needed a proper introduction before seeing the master. And touching his feet was generally forbidden from then on, though they made exceptions if someone was just completely overcome with devotion.
Amidst all this intensity, there were lighter moments too, weren't there? Like the actress who visited in disguise.
Yes, that's a great anecdote. There was an actress who'd met Sri Ramakrishna before, after a play performance, and she really revered him. She desperately wanted to see him again now that he was ill.
But access was restricted now?
Exactly. So she got help from Kalapada Ghosh. Their plan? Disguise her as a young man in European clothes.
Did it work?
Perfectly. They completely fooled the attendants guarding the door, but once inside, they confessed the whole plot to Sri Ramakrishna.
And what did he think?
He's apparently quite amused. He appreciated her cleverness and, more importantly, her genuine faith. He gave her some spiritual advice, she touched his feet, and left.
What about the disciples who'd been fooled?
They were a bit embarrassed when they found out, but because the master himself had clearly enjoyed the whole thing, they couldn't really scold Kalapada for arranging it.
Now, all this intense devotion surrounding Sri Ramakrishna at Shyampukur, it had a downside too, didn't it? A drift towards sentimentalism.
Yes, this is a really crucial point the biography makes. While faith deepened, which was good, some devotees started focusing too much on outward emotional displays. Tears, trances, that sort of thing.
Instead of the harder work.
Exactly. Instead of the core practices of renunciation, self-control. They didn't fully get that just feeling emotional doesn't actually change you or help you overcome worldly attachments. It's not the same as real spiritual transformation.
The text suggests there's a natural tendency for the mind to kind of look for an easier way, to try and have both God and the world.
Precisely. Sri Ramakrishna himself was always careful. He'd assess where newcomers were spiritually before giving advice. He taught householders differently than the young men destined for monastic life.
Right.
His general advice for this age, chanting God's name, was meant to lead gradually towards inner detachment. But many missed that deeper point initially. They also didn't fully appreciate the incredible self-discipline and austerities Sri Ramakrishna himself had gone through. That was the foundation for his emotional expressions, not just feeling things intensely.
And this tendency got quite extreme in some cases.
It did. Girish Ghosh, for instance, passionately believed Sri Ramakrishna was God incarnate, which was his deep conviction. But he started publicly declaring it and insisting everyone should believe it too, without recognizing that his own spiritual state wasn't the same as everyone else's.
Others took it even further.
Oh yes. Some falsely claimed Sri Ramakrishna had given them power of attorney, basically saying they didn't need to do any spiritual practice themselves anymore. Ramchandra Dutta strongly supported Girish, equating Sri Ramakrishna with past avatars and really valuing sentimentalism highly.
And Vijay Krishna Goswami's claim.
Vijay claimed Sri Ramakrishna had actually appeared to him physically during meditation. It all fed into this peak of emotionalism. You had people going into partial trances, making strange physical movements during kirtan, and frankly, a decline in common sense and reasoning among some.
That sounds potentially dangerous for genuine spiritual growth. Did anyone push back against this?
Yes, thankfully. Narendranath saw the danger very clearly. He called it meaningless emotion.
Strong words.
He argued strongly with the other young men. He told them this superficial sentimentality, it doesn't last. It doesn't make you stronger against temptation. He felt a lot of it was just nervous excitement, maybe sometimes even faked. True spiritual feeling, he insisted, comes from self-control.
So what did he advise them to do?
His approach was practical. Practice self-control, eat properly, maybe even see a doctor if it seemed like a physical issue. He wasn't afraid to use ridicule sometimes to expose states he thought were simulated.
But he also offered a positive path.
Absolutely. He tried to inspire genuine devotion and renunciation. He'd sing songs, give talks about Sri Ramakrishna's own intense sadhana, his real greatness. He even used the book Imitation of Christ to make a point.
How so?
To encourage them to emulate the master's character, his detachment, his purity, his compassion. That, Narendra argued, was the true way to show love, not just emotional displays. He reminded them of Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. Keep the knowledge of Advaita
The oneness of reality.
in your pocket and then act as you like. Meaning, that deep understanding of non-duality should be the foundation underneath all actions and emotions. It wasn't just about the emotion itself.
So despite all the care, all the devotion, all the different dynamics at Shyampukur, Sri Ramakrishna's health didn't improve.
No, sadly, his condition continued to worsen, even with Dr. Sarkar's dedicated treatment.
So the doctor recommended another change.
Yes, Dr. Sarkar eventually suggested moving him out of the city entirely to a garden house, somewhere with more fresh air, a better environment.
And they found a place.
They did. After some searching, they rented a spacious garden house belonging to Gopal Chandra Ghosh. It was located in Cossipore. The rent was 80 rupees a month.
And when did they make this move?
Sri Ramakrishna was moved to the Cossipore Garden House on the afternoon of December 11th, 1885. And the report is that he reacted quite positively to the new place.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into those early Shyampukur days, we've covered a lot. Intense challenges in caregiving, just incredible devotion from the disciples, especially the Holy Mother.
And that complex, evolving relationship with Dr. Sarkar, it's fascinating.
Absolutely. Plus, those different ways the devotees tried to understand his illness.
Right.
And the first signs of both profound faith, but also the potential pitfalls, like that wave of sentimentalism.
It really is a powerful story of selfless service when things get tough. And that interaction between science or medicine and deep spiritual belief is just striking. You really see that delicate balance needed, between heartfelt devotion and keeping your feet on the ground spiritually.
Definitely. Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener. When you think about the sheer intensity of devotion back then and all those different interpretations of Sri Ramakrishna's illness, how do communities today handle similar things when a leader or even just a loved one faces a health crisis?
Yeah, what can we learn from this account from nearly 150 years ago? About the strength of collective faith and care, but also maybe the complexities that arise when deep personal feelings and different viewpoints inevitably collide. Something to think about.
I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.